Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now a lot of twists, a lot of turns. A lot is happening out there. On that front also the latest news in fact tell us that the Taliban, they are taking control of various districts, various top cities slowly but surely. A lot of the Afghan security forces are surrendering to the Taliban, and this is exactly what is happening out there. As far as the possibility of a civil war is concerned, I mean, there has to be a political settlement, otherwise things would be very, very difficult, not only for the Afghan government or the people in Afghanistan, but for the regional countries as well, that include Pakistan perhaps. And then on top of that, like a very strong statement given by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan, regarding the support. He said, yes, we will support the Americans to withdraw, but we will not provide any bases to the Americans. Now that is a very interesting interview that he had given to HBO. Let's have a listen.
Happy in one way because there was never going to be any military solution in Afghanistan. Anxious that they are leaving. Without a political settlement, there's a possibility of civil war. A political settlement in Afghanistan would mean a sort of a coalition government, a government from the Taliban side and the other side. There is no other solution. In case Taliban go for an all-out victory, there is going to be incredible amount of bloodshed. And let me tell you, the country that is going to suffer the most after Afghanistan is going to be Pakistan. We already have 3 million Afghan refugees here. And this could lead another exodus. So that is our biggest concern. The Americans, before they leave, there must be a settlement. Absolutely not. There's no way we're going to allow any bases, any sort of action from Pakistani territory into Afghanistan. Absolutely not. Pakistan suffered 70,000 casualties, more than any other country, by joining the American war. We cannot afford any more military actions from our territory. We will be partners in peace, not in conflict.
You were listening to the Prime Minister who was giving an interview, and he was very categorical about a few things. No basis to the Americans. There is only a political solution. No military solution or military approach would be effective in Afghanistan. And the country which is going to suffer if the Americans do not have a proper exit plan and a proper political settlement in Afghanistan, the country which is going to suffer the most is going to be Pakistan. That's exactly what most of the analysts also believe in. Now to talk about this, let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Dr. Talat Shabbir Saab. Needs no introduction. He's an expert on South Asia.
Thank you.
Dr. Saab, a pleasure to have you, sir. And we also have with us Syed Muhammad Ali Saab, expert on foreign affairs. Syed Muhammad Ali is joining us from United States of America. Syed Muhammad Ali, thank you so much for your time, sir. Pleasure to have you on the show as well. And we also have with us Syed Akhtar Ali. He's a security analyst, is also joining us from USA. Let me put the first question to you, Dr. Saab. You heard what the Prime Minister said, and I'm sure that you will agree with him 100%. No basis to the United States military, but the kind of withdrawal that is taking place seems to be in a haste. And now, if a political solution is not arranged before the withdrawal, there could be a civil war-like situation, which seems to be very much possible. And the country which is going to suffer the most is going to be Pakistan. Your take, sir.
Thank you very much. I think for quite some time here in your program, I've been discussing that it's a very complex situation in Afghanistan, and it's not a quick fix kind of thing in Afghanistan. And United States, before leaving, must ensure that there's a settlement and there's a stable government placed so that the peace can come back to Afghanistan. But we also had our assessment about how can this happen in the presence of factions that are contradictory in ideology, contradictory in governance, contradictory in their approaches towards the situation in Afghanistan. One. Second most important thing is that United States has never seen Afghanistan situation from Pakistani prism. They have always seen Afghan situation, Afghan problem, dilemma from their own perspective. So it's not fair that you just see your problems from your own perspective. You have to care about the countries which are hosting And and Prime Minister is right when he says we cannot give these bases to United States for use against Afghanistan, because we have suffered because of it. More than 80,000 casualties we have suffered. Economically we have suffered, and for last 2 decades we had a mess in our country. So how can we decide to have that mess again in our country? Because definitely there are going to be repercussions. Definitely there is going to be consequences of facilitating America in such a way. So I fully agree the way Prime Minister takes it, and I think this is a right stance. Pakistan must and of course America is a superpower, and it's not very easy. It's not going to be very easy going in future. But I think there should be some kind of dialogue where Americans must be persuaded and must be told that look, if you just want bases because you want counter-terrorism operations from Pakistan, but we will have repercussions, we will have problems, we will have refugees, we will have terrorism.
Now it's high time that we should look after our own interests.
Yes, and
simple as that. We have to sacrificed enough, and enough is enough.
Yes, we have to guard our interest. And of course, when they say you talked about hasty withdrawal, I think there was no need of that kind of haste. When
earlier it was 1st of May,
yes.
Then they decided 9/11, but most likely by the 4th of July they'll be out.
There's a lot of haste. I don't know why they just want to leave things in mess. It's not, you created a mess for last 20 years and you just want to leave immediately and leave things to maybe neighbors to settle on. This is not the right option. I think we need to be very, very clear on this. We have to be very, very open and candid about this use of Pakistani soil against any country.
All right, now one important area, and coming to you, Syed Muhammad Ali, that is about the areas where we have convergence of interest and where we have divergence of interest. Now, perhaps it seems that Pakistan was one country which always believed that military solution is no solution in Afghanistan. All these drone attacks perhaps were very counterproductive, and Prime Minister Imran Khan has said that on numerous occasions. And if you look at the government, I mean, look at the time that was during 2007-8 till 2013 when People's Party was in power, maximum number of drone attacks. Perhaps prior to that, when Musharraf was in power, there were. Post that, when Nawaz Sharif Saab took charge, there were a lot of drone attacks. But since Imran Khan has taken charge, not even a single drone attack. So I'm just going to give you an example that where there is a will, there is a way. You have to put your foot down. Now, sir, areas, when we talk about that this is what is our interest, this is what we should look after, and that is perhaps the interest of the Americans. If there is a clash, we should look after ours. Now, sir, the areas where you have some sort of a mutual interest and areas where you do not have any interest, rather it is a total different poles apart kind of an approach. Your take, sir.
Well, I do endorse the decision not to allow counter-terrorism bases in Pakistan. That would have prolonged the mess. And I mean, one hopes that we've learned from the past. That being said, there are still several issues where there are convergences of interest. And those are long-term stabilization. In the near future, there will probably be a lot of uncertainty. There's high potential of conflict and violence. But I think for Pakistan itself, it does also need stabilization in Afghanistan. There's no doubt about that. And we do need to sort of have a flexible approach, not only bet on the dark horse of the Taliban, certainly, but then there are issues, right? There's water sharing, for instance. Now, the Kabul River, with the glacial melt in the Karakoram and the Himalayas, Afghanistan does not have a water treaty with any of its neighboring countries. I mean, with Iran, they had one in the 70s. It never really operationalized because of the chaos in Afghanistan. With Pakistan, there's no water treaty. And, if you look at the Kabul River, it's an upper and lower riparian simultaneously, where, and with population pressure and water scarcity, that can become a major issue. Now, if the US and the international community is interested in long-term stabilization, agriculture, productivity, drinking water supplies, within Afghanistan, and Pakistan has those concerns also, we should be talking. We should be talking about water. We should be talking about water sharing. Otherwise, it's going to become another bone of contention, right? I mean,
I think it has already become, sir, after that dam that was being built on river Kabul. It has already become an issue.
Yeah, so so the water is one issue, but then similarly with the border, we've taken a maximalist approach. We were very critical of President Trump and what he was trying to do, build a wall, but Pakistan has also taken a very hard stance on border fencing. Given that the Durrani line has historically been a porous area. And there were possibilities, and they on paper at least, there's talk of border markets, for instance. Right?
Syed Muhammad Ali, one point here, because when you talk about the Durrani line, there were issues with the Afghan government also, but that is exactly what the position of Pakistan is, and in fact, as a matter of fact, that the Afghan Taliban never believed in that. Do you think the way they are taking over, because I have some footages which are unbelievable, the way they are being welcomed and they're taking over cities and they're in huge numbers, I mean, gaining access to whatever the Afghan forces are leaving, whether it's the weapon or the jeeps or other assets they have. Do you think at some stage they could pose a threat to Pakistan regarding the border?
Well, the different assessments, right? I mean, even sort of congressional research report says that actually Pakistan, I mean, this is a cynical take, right, on Pakistan's intentions. And it says that Pakistan actually wants destabilization. It doesn't want a strong Pashtun-dominated government, because then the Durrani line issue is going to come up again. But I mean, it doesn't take into account the fact that, Pakistan will also have a direct adverse impact in terms of refugee flows. So I mean, the jury's still out on the kind of power sharing formula that's going to come in place, but Pakistan has not, with the Kabul government, Pakistan has not been able to see eye to eye, and it's highly unlikely that government is going to survive in its current form, given already the factionalism in Afghan politics, and of course then the military leverage that the Taliban are using, and they're in no mood to really negotiate, right, and compromise, because they have a military edge and they're going to try and probably continue pressing it. And, and the situation's not looking really good right now.
All right. Now, Syed Akhtar Ali Saab, first of all, sir, thank you very much for your time as well. And let me also tell my viewers that Syed Akhtar Ali is joining us from Peshawar. He's a security analyst. Syed Ali Akhtar Saab, first of all, sir, the probability of a civil war-like situation, because when you talk about a civil war, there are different stages. It seems that the civil war-like situation is already existing. Perhaps it is at its very basic level, where the Taliban are gaining control and they will eventually become a strength which no other political party, no other, I would say, group can challenge. Perhaps they might not have the right number when it comes to a free, fair and transparent election and to win it, but sir, when it comes to the street power, they are unbeatable. So if they are taking charge, if the US forces, they are exiting from Afghanistan, forget about the training. I mean, if they could not train the Afghan forces during the last 20 years, 3-4 months of training in Qatar or in Turkey or in some other countries will not help. Because psychologically, the Taliban, they have an edge. Psychologically, the Afghan forces, they are on a run, and it seems that eventually the Taliban will take over. But this time, do you think the situation is going to be different than the one which we have previously witnessed when 3 countries, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and UAE, accepted the government of the Taliban?
The situation which is emerging in Afghanistan is more or less similar to the days of Dr. Najibullah, when of Taliban eventually succeeded and captured Kabul. So again, the conclusion is that if no international help is there for the bolstering of Afghan security forces, then there is every likelihood the Taliban have their own strategic objectives. And in order to achieve those objectives, they keep on changing their tactics. We have seen their pattern even in Pakistan, in Swat and others, where they would ink agreements, then after some time they would break the agreements and then make their tactical advance. So the same pattern is also being observed in Afghanistan. They have already captured 40 districts. There is a power vacuum. Someone has to fill that power vacuum. The only solution which I can suggest is that the presence of some international forces under the UN mandate, that can be Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, or other countries. They have to act as a neutral empires to oversee the transition in Afghanistan. Otherwise, Taliban very well know that the might of gun has been accepted. Agreement, United States of America had already made agreements and they have accepted their might. So they would while bargaining, using this as a bargaining chip, they would also insist on the release of their prisoners, remaining prisoners, then removing their lists, maintained lists. So these are some of the
Syed Akhtar Sahab, we'll, in fact, once again, we'll reconnect with you because I cannot hear your voice very clearly, so there's a lot of breaking up. But anyway, we'll just get back to you on that, sir, and I'll definitely take your point of view. But let me come to you, sir. Now, one very important area. I was listening to one of the statements of Mullah Abdul Ghani brother. Now, what he said that, you know, we live in the 21st century, we do understand about the dynamics of the present time. We do believe that women should have their rights, and once we will be in power, we'll look after those issues. And yes, we do understand that there will be embassies in Kabul and the airport needs to be secured, that area needs to be secured. So obviously, if they are providing that kind of a facilitation to all those who are foreigners perhaps or from other countries, they'll be looked after, do not worry. And they promise that there's not going to be bloodshed unless until there's a proper retaliation from the other side. So that kind of a scenario, do you think is going to be sort of a workable solution? Or it can have its own sort of problems later?
Yes, I think Taliban also have come a long way. You know, when we had them in 90s.
Those last 25 years, do you think they've changed the mindset or the perception?
But I think they at least realize that they can't work in silos. They have to have international relations. You have to have regional countries around you. You have some kind of cooperation. You need economic assistance. You need development. You know, they realize these things. But you know, the problem is of their own legitimacy inside Afghanistan first. The problem is of their own internal issues, you know, where there are not only Taliban, but there are Taliban, they are, as you said, they are street power. But you know, the other factions in Afghanistan, they won't you know, let that street power to rule. They would look for some kind of legitimacy or some kind of constitutional.
So whether you talk about the people living in Panjshir, son of Ahmad Shah Massoud or his brother for that matter, or Abdullah, three very prominent figures. Or you talk about, let's suppose, Uzbek side. You're talking about Dostum there, who has got a good military, or the rebel power, let's put it this way. And then there are so many other warlords there. This is a complete call for a civil war-like situation, sir.
Yeah, I think, you know, civil war, in my assessment, is just coming. Because, you know, when, you know, American forces were there, and we also assessed that they must find some kind of solution, and they must place a stable government there, which can run and a government representative of all the Afghan factions, which couldn't be possible, you know, with a lot of efforts from all countries from the world. Now, when you leave that country in a state of mess and you expect there will be peace in that country, it's not, it's not possible. And, Americans, they expect a lot of counter-terrorism, work coming up in Afghanistan because there are many terrorist organizations which will, get strengthened in the country. There'll be very many groups will arise in Afghanistan, and Americans will need to do some kind of counter-terrorism operation, and that is what they are asking. I think insurgency like
so they are
situation,
also considering the Haqqani network as an adversary. They are primarily talking about Daesh or the presence of TTP. They never talk about TTP.
yes,
They never talk about other elements. I mean, they always claim that they have finished Al-Qaeda, but still they talk about getting rid of Al-Qaeda. You talk about so many other factors, whether it's Daesh or ISIS, or you talk about, for example, the presence of Hizbul Tahrir, Hizbul Harar, and so, I mean, there's a long list,
yes.
all funded and supported by the Indians.
And the most important thing is, if the Americans think they have been successful in dealing with the Afghan situation and they're now victor
Sadly,
power,
they're mistaken.
that they are mistaken. And it's not like that. It's a complete mess. And forces, you call it Al-Qaeda, you call it ISIS, but they are there. They are there to affect you. They are there to, they are, as the way you see, American forces are there, and Taliban are taking over the posts. Your trained Afghan National Army, they are leaving their posts. They are almost surrendering to the power that be. So I think it's a very complex situation, and things are going to be worsening in times to come. And of course, the way Prime Minister said that the most, the country which will face the most brunt would be Pakistan after Afghanistan, and this is going to be a very alarming situation for us.
I think that is the most important point. And let's take it to our friend Syed Muhammad Ali. So when we talk about the threats posed to Pakistan, obviously law and order situation is going to be one very important area to look into. You talk about the overall border situation, that is going to be affected because we keep on seeing cross-border terrorism from the Afghan side. Presence of India and the presence of RAW definitely is going to make things a lot worse for us. And then the kind of support these non-state actors they enjoy from India and from a couple of other intelligence agencies. So that is going to be another problem. So it seems that Afghanistan is going to be in trouble, but Pakistan could be the only country perhaps that is going to, take the blow. Your take, sir.
Well, I mean, the country that's going to take the real blow is going to be Afghanistan itself. But no doubt, I mean, there, even in the Pakistani sort of tribal areas with the TTP and its reconfiguring, because I think one issue that the Pakistani sort of security analysts have been pushing back in their sort of debate with American security analysts is that, look, there's a certain extent to which Pakistan can apply pressure on the Taliban. I mean, the Taliban have become quite savvy. They have relationships, I mean, from Russia to Iran to Qatar to the Gulf states, even India now, because they are kind of emerging as a de facto power. So Pakistan has leverage, but it doesn't have exclusive leverage. And Pakistan has had to, while it's accommodated and worked with the Taliban, it's also been wary of not pushing them so hard that there would be an alignment between the Taliban and the TTP, right? So these two groups have in the past been kept separate. But now, in the ensuing chaos, because it's not going to be a straightaway takeover by the Taliban. I mean, this is, while it's not an entirely responsible exit, these are the maneuvers that the US is trying to put in place, right? There is going to be an international commitment, including by NATO, to keep funding counterterrorism capacity over the horizon, right? I mean, there are countries like Turkey and others, right? I mean, they're still exploring the possibility of other bases, providing security to the Kabul airport. The Taliban don't want any of that to happen. But, then there is the Tajik element, like you mentioned, Faisal. There are other regional players with contending interests. So that is going to complicate. I mean, this is the fear, right? That if the international community and the neighbors can at least come on the page, right, where they can all work together to have some power sharing formula that might not be the ideal recipe for any of the adjoining countries.
Now, Ali
But
Sahab, Tajiks always had a very strong support from the Indians, right, sir? But what if the Taliban are gaining control? So the Indians definitely they will have a different sort of plan in place. So that would lead to another disaster there, sir.
well, I mean, there's, according to some assessments, I mean, the Indians have realized, right, like they felt that while they were the largest regional donor to Afghanistan, they didn't have the kind of, they have economic leverage and perhaps, penetration into Afghanistan and influence over Afghanistan, but they were not a player in the Afghan peace process. So I think on the sidelines, them and other countries, including China for that matter, are now also they've opened up lines of communication with the Taliban. I think the Indians realized the folly of not doing that and have embarked on signaling and assessing the extent to which they can communicate with them. So Pakistan, it's not going to be a straightforward matter of the Taliban entirely following, having sort of Islamic sympathies. I mean, already they've signaled a few months ago, right, that for them Kashmir is not really an issue, right? I mean, because their concern is domestic. They don't have these international
They don't
aspirations.
have any agenda beyond the borders of Afghanistan, sir. Yeah.
Pardon?
I'm saying they do not have any agenda beyond the borders of Afghanistan. The Taliban I'm
Yes,
talking about.
the Taliban. That's what they say, yes.
Now another important point, Syed Akhtar Sahab, is about these statements being issued by the Afghan government, by the President Ashraf Ghani, and in particular by the National Security Advisor of Afghanistan. And they are very anti-Pakistan, sir. And there is a lot of sort of a reaction coming from the Foreign Office and in particular from the Foreign Minister. Now, so where is that situation going to lead?
There has been a perception in Afghanistan throughout the history. They had their grievances, but recently the Afghan foreign minister perhaps and the Pakistani foreign minister, Mr. Shah Qureshi, had exchange of views quite recently. So whenever any country is in such a trouble, they find faults. But the main thing is that they have also to put their house in order by bolstering their capacity of their Afghan National Army and the police. And they have to, we all are, you see, recently the Prime Minister of Pakistan very categorically stated that there has to be a political settlement of Afghanistan. And going by that statements, it appears that Pakistan also want to have a government in Afghanistan which is neutral, which is the product of the intra-Afghan dialogue. So we also have to, by our own diplomatic efforts, to erase such perception, which may be false, by our own diplomatic efforts, prepare the grounds where the conflicting parties in Afghanistan agree to have intra-Afghan dialogue and resolve the issue through some mechanism for which there has to be some terms of references. And eventually, if they want to avoid a civil war and to have a government of consensus, there has to be an interim government in Afghanistan. And then for that, they have to draw a new constitution accommodating all the political groups within Afghanistan, including the Taliban. Otherwise, if exclusively the Taliban captures the Afghan Kabul government, then we cannot be in a win-win situation because we live in a world where there is which is now focused on interconnectivity, and then we will not be having advantage of connecting ourselves to Central Asian states and then Eurasia. So I don't think that in such a situation, Pakistan exclusively support is agree.
All right. Now, Shabbir Saab, talking about the Afghan endgame and the geopolitics. I mean, it's been 20 years since, you know, the Americans invaded Afghanistan. And ever since, there is no, I mean, the claims were very high when George Bush used to say that we'll smoke the Taliban out. They could not, sir. Today they are negotiating with them and actually ready to hand over the power to them also.
Yes.
So waste of those 20 years, wastage of trillions of dollars, wastage of hundreds of thousands of lives in Afghanistan, and waste of at least around 2,700 American soldiers also, their lives. I mean, obviously. And the end achievement was nothing. Al-Qaeda is still there, the Taliban, they are still there. Even it's a more complex situation at the moment as we speak. Now, sir, once the Americans will leave, and they're asking for the bases so that they can look after the affairs, they will have their own people. The embassy in Kabul is the largest US embassy on earth. Simple as that, sir. And you know the number of people who are working there. They are not all diplomats.
Yes.
Everyone has a different assignment. Do you think the Americans will be able to control the situation while being inside their bunker kind of an embassy, and they could, you know, take care of? Or do you think they will still depend on countries like Iran, for that matter, post JCPOA, in fact, arrangement, or Pakistan? Perhaps they also always end up saying Pakistan to do more, or to go after the Haqqani network, or sort of launch operations or similar activities against the non-state actors, who might be non-state actors for them, but they are not a threat to Pakistan. You know, similarly, it's a situation otherwise also. Do you think that is going to be a problem and a half for the entire region, perhaps, sir?
I think this is going to be a problem for the region, and that is what is our assessment. For example, when I look at Americans' involvement during last 20 years, you know, by being there, they were unable, like it was our analysis 2 months back, that 50% of the area of Afghanistan is controlled by government, 30% by Taliban, and 20% is contested. Now, who's contesting? Taliban are contesting, or non-state actors are contesting. If by being in full force there, they were unable to control Afghanistan, so it won't be possible.
But the point here, was there a will? That's the point.
Yeah, but of course, because they definitely have a pressure. They have, you know, kind of, you know, world is looking at them, okay, for last 20 years. Because if there's a kind of pressure on maybe academia or scholars in Washington DC that you are loser, you are not the winner. Don't pose yourself as victor in Afghanistan. So they have a, you know, kind of this public opinion also. You know, though they try to tell the world that, look, we have, but they have not. They have actually contributed to the mess of Afghanistan for last 20 years. So one thing which we talked, almost talked for last 20 years also, that there should be Afghan there should be a solution which should be representing Afghan factions, that there should be Afghan built, it should be purely Afghan solution.
Afghan-led, Afghan-owned.
Afghan-led, Afghan-owned. So they have not been able to create a kind of framework where there is a solution which is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned. So I don't think so. Now in this in the haste, you know, they can create kind of Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution, and it will definitely have spillover impacts of Pakistan.
The problem is, sir, whenever we talk about Afghan-owned, I mean, Afghan-owned means the government should have a solution, or the opposition should have a solution, the Taliban should come up with a solution, because it seems that there's an absolute confusion.
Yeah, but I think the fault lies somewhere. They did not leave Afghan affairs to Afghans for long.
How important the intra-Afghan dialogue would be, sir? They meet, but they never come up with a solution.
They don't have, they can't have, as I said, they are different people for each other. You know, they have different ideologies. They look at each other with, like, you know, hostility, and they take each other as
previous
enemies.
grievances.
Yes, grievances. And of course, like when you see the power in Kabul will be decided by someone who has power in streets. So how will you find a very sensible and very constitutional solution representing all the factions? When now why Taliban are now getting stronger day by day, because they hold areas. They are powerful in streets. They can now they are I think Afghan National Army, most of the force will be joining their ranks. So they are powerful. They will decide what to do in Afghanistan. So that kind of solution, which was Afghan broad-based solution, doesn't seem to come.
Now, Syed Muhammad Ali, the regrouping of the various factions, though they have different narratives, they have very, opposite approach as well. But it seems that, when it comes to, something against the government or against any particular country, it seems that their ideology doesn't matter. Money matters, that support matters, the kind of assets given to them, that, is a very major and important component. So they do not have an ideology as such. Taking over Afghanistan, then what? You know what I'm saying? How many countries will properly engage Afghanistan diplomatically, politically, and otherwise? Pakistan is the country that can provide the road access, the rail access to Afghanistan. Everything, they import comes from Pakistan mostly. So Pakistan, in fact, is a very important country. Do you think we still have certain cards in our hand that can make them understand that, listen, your future is linked with Pakistan's future, and we can both work together for the betterment of the region rather than being an adversary? Your take, sir?
Well, I agree with you, and I think that we have also squandered many opportunities over the past 20 years. We have, we complain that, we have been viewed from a very myopic, a very narrow lens.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Pakistan has also not done much, right, about that. So, for instance, on trade, right? India has shown more foresight by investing in the Afghan economy. We've talked about a preferential trade agreement with Afghanistan, right? But even with the US, now the US realizes and has spoken about, and this has gone from the Congress up to the Senate. Again, there's there's an attempt to revive the ROZ. So the Reconstruction Opportunity Zone was an idea that the US has tried elsewhere in difficult places, right? Like between Egypt and Israel, for instance. So the idea with the ROZ was that there would be an area straddling perhaps the border. The arrangements of it were yet to be worked out, but basically Afghanistan and Pakistan working together to produce products which would be provided preferential access to American markets, right? And that kind of incentivization would have been a win-win for everyone. Certainly for Afghanistan and for Pakistan. Now, because of various reasons, it didn't quite make it, in the Senate and didn't turn into legislation, but there's an attempt to do that again. And Afghanistan and Pakistan, Afghanistan is still kind of in disarray, but Pakistan has right now an opportunity that it should seize. Right, and it should have done that in the past several years, that it was an interlocutor in the peace dialogue, to have simultaneously brought onto the table this economic opportunity and used its leverage at that time to apply pressure on US legislators to pass this kind of legislation, right? But when one talks to people who are in the know, in Pakistan, there hasn't been enough homework done on this. So, in the world of real politics, one needs to be proactive, right? And one needs to go to the table with one's homework done. And we haven't seen this kind of proactiveness. So, the water example I gave earlier, I give this example. I disagree that in the last 20 years, nothing has happened in Afghanistan. Yes, $2 trillion was spent, right, and less than 10% or around 10% went to development. But, there are, thousands of schools, girls' schools, in Afghanistan. There's investment in infrastructure. So it's not to say that it's like it was under the Taliban rule earlier, but certainly, I mean, the bulk of the money has been spent on keeping the US forces on the ground. It's been spent on the Afghan National Army, which is necessary, but with huge attrition rates. They train people and they'd like kind of disappear.
Yeah,
So a
exactly.
lot of money has been wasted on contractors. A lot of money has been sort of squandered and it's a chicken and egg problem, right? Like security and development. But
All right.
instead of waiting to get security and then focus on development, these, like the Americans say, you need to walk and chew gum at the same time. And, and Pakistan should also have been doing that in the past 20 years.
Now, a quick comment from you, Syed Akhtar Ali Saab. I mean, every country has a plan, and then we have contingency plans and, the kind of backup plans we need to have in place. Most of the analysts, even our Prime Minister, said that, a civil war-like situation is developing in Afghanistan. What sort of a backup plan you think we need to devise, we need to have in place, just in case things go bad there, which most probably they will? First of all, sir, there's going to be a huge load of refugees coming into Pakistan. We already are looking after 3 million plus. I'm sure the number should be at least 5 million because they've been here for such a long time, and this is the third generation perhaps, or maybe the fourth in certain cases because they get married very early. So looking at that issue and the kind of pressure, the inflow of people, drugs, Taliban, all the wrong sort of, perhaps the individuals coming into Pakistan, as you said, that it is a porous border. No matter what you do, still, it is very difficult to manage. You see that kind of a situation? If so, what should be in place even now? Let's not be reactive and wait for another 2-3 months. Let's be proactive, sir.
Naturally, when there is a civil war in Afghanistan, going by the history, there is likelihood to be a massive flow of refugees into Pakistan. We have our, National Disaster Management Authority, then the Provincial Disaster Management Authority. And even during the operations in North Waziristan and Khyber, we had been managing the internally displaced person. So we are quite adept in that as far as managing the refugees are concerned. For that, we have to devise the first stage is the moment, the security during the moment from the Afghanistan border up to different destination. We have to then set up registration points on all the exit points. Then we have registration on the incoming refugees. Then we have to, of course, then devise for the health, sanitation, and other such arrangements necessary for managing human in the camps and outside the camps. And then we have to also engage ourselves with the international agencies like UNHCR and also donors in order to cater for the Afghan refugees. At the same time, we have now,
all right. Once again, sir, there seems to be some sort of a technical problem. I can't hear you properly.
But the inflow from those routes. But having said this, our test will be whether we have already been successful in controlling the non-custom paid vehicles, which our tribal areas, now the merged tribal areas, the Malakand division are all crowded. So if we cannot manage the smuggled items and the non-paid custom vehicles, then of course if these vehicles can reach Pakistan, then you see, mischief mongers and the terrorists can also enter Pakistan. So it depends on the efficacy of the security forces to plug such holes which can be used by such elements. And
All
of
right.
course,
Or Syed Akhtar Ali Saab, since we are running out of time, thank you so much for your comments. It was a pleasure to have you. Syed Muhammad Ali and Dr. Talat Shabbir Saab, was a pleasure to have you as well. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 or 5. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.